All right, let's talk more about where the different tariff measures stand and what it means for you with my guest tonight, David Clement with the Consumer Choice Center. He's in Canada. He's up late with me tonight here on the Final Five. Welcome back to the show. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again, too.
It's been incredible to see just this back and forth between the U.S. and Canada. Give me a sense of how the dynamic is playing out north of the border.
Not well. Not well, because the response from Ottawa and the federal government has been essentially that our first round of counter tariffs are still in place. But where it's really not seen as good enough, where Trump's pause is not seen as good enough, is at the provincial level. So Premier Ford, whom you showed that clip of, David Eby, the Premier of BC, and Tim Houston, the Premier of Nova Scotia, have all come out today and said that the pause is not good enough and that their own provincial retaliatory measures are going to stay in place until the tariff threat is done away with. And so there's a real strain and level of damage right now in the relationship between the United States and Canada, which has forever been one of the most important relationships, both on trade but also on other important issues for so long. So it's a really sad thing to see as a Canadian who is very often in the United States. It's just really sad to see that deterioration right now.
Give me a sense, though, of the political dynamic when we talk about Justin Trudeau, who, many people kind of liken him to, say, Barack Obama in terms of his policies and his worldview. Doug Ford, the premier, people may recognize the last name. He is the brother of the late Rob Ford, who was the controversial mayor of Toronto. Both of them came to power on the heels of these populist sentiments over time. It almost seems like that approach would be simpatico with Donald Trump.
You would think, but at the same time, I don't think that the Trump administration would hold back if the situation was flipped. And that has been very much Doug Ford's brand. Some people will liken him to Donald Trump. There are various differences. We don't really need to get into it, but he does have some of that populist appeal that people like. And it's the tough kind of response that we're seeing from the Ontario Premier right now. And what's really interesting is we have a bit of a vacuum federally because Justin Trudeau is just days away from stepping down as leader of the Liberal Party. So we'll have a new leader of the Liberal Party, a new prime minister. But in that vacuum, Doug Ford, to his credit in many senses, at least the viewpoint of many people in Ontario where I am, has kind of become Captain Canada in some senses. And I mean, even Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, phoned Doug Ford after the tariff announcement, which is interesting. It would be like our prime minister phoning a governor and not the president. And so the dynamics there are very interesting. To the Premier's credit, he has said, I don't want to do any of these retaliatory measures. I love Americans. We have one of the greatest trading relationships on earth, and we should protect that. We should enhance it. He's saying we want to send more energy to the United States, not less. And so I would love to see what comes out of this being more of that direction, more free trade, more interconnectedness between our economies, because the progress we've made since the signing of NAFTA has been a net benefit for both countries and both economies. We should be building on that, not trying to tear that down.
And how do you proceed now, considering the fact that we keep kicking the can down the alley when it comes to postponing these tariffs? You know, it was going to be a month ago. Now it might be next month. I mean, how do you operate? Not you, but how does Canada operate on this idea that threat's always going to be hanging overhead with no guarantee that Donald Trump will ever actually follow through with it?
It's chaos. It's absolute chaos. Anyone who imports has to be making business decisions, essentially what feels like on a whim, because the conditions and circumstances can change on a dime. So something you were going to import tomorrow, the pricing on that changed in a matter of an afternoon.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're going to rejig your supply chains now is shifted 30 days. But as we saw with the auto manufacturers and their request for a pause with the president, you cannot build a factory to repurpose auto parts to be made in the United States in a week
Correct.
or in a month. And many people would argue 6 months or even a year. The integrated supply chains, especially in the automotive sector, is a great thing between Canada and the United States. Yeah. And it's just not possible to flick a switch and say, okay, we're going to buy these things from the United States now.
Right.
The logistics are just way too difficult.
David, I got to leave it at that. Good to see you again. Thank you for staying up late with us. Obviously, an important perspective to share. David from the Consumer Choice Center on the Final Five. In the meantime, stick around. We are back after this.